An entitled Karen constantly trespasses on our property, destroying the flowers in our garden, and refusing to leave, claiming that a property owner down the hill gave her permission to stand wherever she wants on our property. But even after the cops are called and given her a warning, she still refuses to leave, eventually leading to this entitled Karen serving some time in prison. Here's what happened. So at the time of these events, we live in a nice house on a cul-de-sac, all up on a hill with a great view of the valley and the lake. Our property is long and narrow. It is about twice as long as any other lot on the street, but instead of a big backyard, it has a really long side yard that extends from the driveway to the corner of the cul-de-sac with a main road. It is mostly grass, but there is a cluster of scrub oak in a flower garden that takes up at least 12 to 15 feet of it. After the scrub oak is a chain link fence, and beyond that is the side of the next house down the hill on the main road. You can see their driveway and backyard from the middle of the scrub oak cluster. This is all very important, by the way, and the reason it is important is because these neighbors have chickens and a rooster. When we moved in, there were a lot of failed flowering plants on the property. The only non-weed growing in abundance in this side yard garden were iris. I swear you can grow an iris anywhere, but they are not the longest lived flowers in the world. My beautiful wife had great plans for this space, but she knew she needed to start with some small plants, and as they grow, the rest of the plants could develop. She started with some annuals that could start to reclaim the land from the weeds, as well as some ground covers that, as they progressed, would help choke out any of the unwanted grasses. She knew it would take some time, but she'd done it all before. It would eventually involve a bunch of other plants, but she was up to the task. But imagine her surprise when she goes to plant another round just to find a fair number of the smaller plants that she had planted had been trampled and or crushed. It was thoroughly disheartening. So she buys some more and plants them, only to find them crushed and trampled as well a few days later. And this process repeats again and again. And at this point, she is starting to feel like she is just wasting money planting anything in that area. Eventually, though, we discover exactly what is happening. We catch the daughter of the people 2 houses down the circle from us, with her toddler in a stroller, pushing him right up to the chain link fence without any concern about what damage she and the stroller could do. My wife then says, "What do you think you're doing in my garden?" This entitled mother then says, "My son wants to see the chickens. They gave us permission to see them anytime we want." My wife then looks at her and says, "Okay, well then go see them," basically implying, "Hey, you shouldn't be in our garden." But this entitled Karen just doubles down and says, "Well, we are." My wife then explains to her that she does not have permission to do this on our property, but she claims that the people down the road gave her permission. So my wife says that they can go to their house if they really want to see these chickens. But this entitled mother was not having it. She then says, "That is too far, and then I have to push him back up the hill from there. He can see them just fine from here." But my wife once again responded by saying that you don't have permission to be here, all while this entitled Karen viciously claimed that they gave her permission to be here. My wife then said, "No, they didn't. They can't get permission from my property. Don't you see what you're doing to my plants?" The entitled mother then looks down and says, "You mean these weeds?" My wife then says, "Look closer. You have destroyed 5 new little plants that I paid good money for, and I didn't pay for them just for you to run over them with your stroller. And that's just today. I've had to replant them 5 times now." This stupid Karen still just said that she only saw weeds on the ground, but my wife wasn't having it. She said, "It doesn't matter what you see. You are not welcome here. You are trespassing on my property. If you really want to go see these chickens, then go to their house and see the chickens. But stay out of my garden. If I see you here again, I will have to call the police." And with that, my wife sent her on her way, while she complained the entire way back to the street. But of course, as you could probably guess it, this wasn't the end of it. Eventually, we of course keep finding our plants destroyed. We start to see ruts form in the lawn from the frequent crossing on the stroller over it. We catch them sometimes and repel them away, but they still keep going to see the chickens. From what we can tell, it is at least daily, and possibly several times a day. We both work, and there are a few windows that see out of the house in that direction. If we see her going down the street in front of our house from the kitchen, we can block her from going back there, but she keeps coming back. She always claims to have permission, and we always inform her that she does not have permission. She never pays for the damage, and she also never acknowledges that it ever happens. We talk to the police about it, and they give her a stern warning, but it does nothing to deter her, and clearly does not scare her in the slightest. We can't tell if she's under the influence of some kind of substance or has some other glitch that blocks her from getting the message. She is relentless. I only wish that motion-activated sprinklers were a thing when this was going on. It would have been perfect to use for them. But finally, as if a miracle from heaven, she just stops appearing. The ruts start to heal, and my beautiful wife cautiously plants a few cheap starters, and they eventually take in the garden. Sometime later, in conversing with the owner of the chickens, we learn that she is serving time. Apparently, she was using a great deal of illegal substances, and had been caught holding enough stuff for them to take it fairly seriously. Her beautiful little baby still lives there. Grandma is now raising him, and they drive down once a week so he can see the chickens, which is honestly so much better than walking through our garden. How crazy is that? My first thought honestly was, is this lady on some kind of substance? Because I can't honestly think someone would act this crazy and still continue this action. If I was in that situation, I would absolutely be putting up cameras or an automatic sprinkler. That's a great idea, because having someone like that trespassing on your property is already jarring enough, and to find out that it's happening while you're not even home is super scary. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea just to put up some kind of sprinkler system just in case this lady ever comes back. That way, if she does decide to walk through your yard, she'll get soaked in the process. And if that doesn't get the message across that she's not welcome there, then I really don't know what will. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My husband is blaming me for Christmas being ruined, as he proceeded to yell at me in a way that I've never been talked to in our entire marriage, and now I really don't know what to do. So we've been married for about 8 months now, and this is our first Christmas together. He has 2 kids from a previous marriage, ages 5 and 7. He was supposed to have the kids for Christmas morning according to the custody order, but the little ones begged to stay with their mom. His ex does have a large family, and it was going to be a huge Christmas for them, with lots of cousins and grandparents, whereas my husband doesn't have any family nearby. I had done all the decorations and cooking like he wanted, but I had made desserts that I know how to bake, and not the cookies that the kids wanted, because I don't know how to make them. Since the divorce, every Christmas the kids have asked to stay with their mom, since that sounds more fun to them, and that has seriously been a painful point for him. I understand that, and so I put in a lot of work to try and make this as magical as we can for our home, but the kids still wanted to stay with their extended family, which is also something I empathize with. I myself come from a large family, and I totally understand how the kids feel. Also, the kids are so young, so they couldn't possibly understand how this would be so heartbreaking, and that's exactly what happened. My husband was heartbroken about all of it, and I tried to console him and make him happy. As Christmas morning rolled around, he was sad over all the unopened presents for his kids. I tried to distract him by pointing out that we could use this time to celebrate our relationship, but when I said that, he absolutely blew up on me. He called me a failure for my inability to make the cookies that they usually had, saying that this is the reason the kids didn't want to stay. He started screaming at me, saying that marrying me was a compromise, and that he married someone not in his league, just so his kids could have a good mother figure for once, implying that I am basically worthless because I couldn't even do something as simple as making some cookies. He then said some stuff about all the ways I'm lacking physically, and that he was just stuck with a prude for the rest of his life. And when he said this, I was so shocked. I simply just couldn't say anything. So I just got up, got my purse, and I left. I drove straight to my parents' house. We were supposed to arrive for dinner together, but everyone could see that something was wrong with me just showing up by myself. But I decided that I didn't want to tell anybody anything. I didn't want to ruin their Christmas. Eventually, my husband also shows up for dinner time and acted all pleasant and normal, as if nothing was wrong. He gave me my gift, which were some expensive earrings, and he was very charming to my family the entire night. When we got back, he went straight to bed, and now I've been sitting up thinking that there's no coming back from what he said to me. Would it be a mistake to quietly plan my exit? What should I do? This is actually quite terrible. The fact that your husband would freak out over something so small and then try and blame you for his kids leaving to go with his ex-wife is absolutely atrocious. It's not your fault that they chose to go with his ex-wife, so the fact that he's trying to pin that down on you is really disgusting in my opinion. And why on earth is he freaking out about these cookies? It sounds like he didn't even give you any kind of recipe for you to try and follow so that you could provide these cookies for your family. So you were clearly set up for failure from the beginning. So no, you are not to blame for the kids going off to the ex-wife, because if he really wanted those stupid cookies ready for Christmas Day, he would have made them himself. I mean, what's stopping him from doing that? He probably knows the recipe, or can at least reach out to someone who probably does know it. And let's not also forget the fact that he literally showed up to dinner as if nothing was wrong. Like, imagine that. This guy freaks out on you, he throws this big temper tantrum, and then decides to try and make it sound like nothing happened, as well as giving you this gift, while also basically saying you're worthless for not knowing how to bake cookies. All of it just really comes off as creepy, and something that I honestly would not want in my life either. So if that's the decision you want to make, where you're like, you know what, I want to get out of here, then based on what you've described and the way he freaked out under the pressure, I can completely understand where you're coming from. I'm willing to guess that this is probably not an isolated incident, so it makes me believe that he probably has temper tantrums like this all the time, on top of the fact that he really tried to blame Christmas being ruined on you. So I think you need to take this at face value and know that you really have seen him at his worst, and this is probably his true colors overall. So I don't blame you in the slightest for deciding to step away, because you do not need this kind of energy in your life. I am convinced that Christmas is a curse Christmas for me, as something bad happens to me every single Christmas that I have, and at this point I don't know what to do. I'm gonna start off by saying that I don't much care about Christmas. Ever since becoming an adult, there's no fun in it for me. I'm an only child, and my parents divorced, and there's no sense of family or togetherness this time of year, just financial stress, especially because I work in a hotel restaurant, and this time of year is really slow. I volunteered to work Christmas Eve and Christmas, because most of my coworkers have kids, and I don't have any plans anyways. On the bright side, we actually were busier than we had been in weeks, probably because no one wanted to go outside because it was like 5 degrees. The restaurant is a sports bar type place. Things picked up later, but for the first hour or so, we were open and it was completely silent. Myself and the other server, as well as the host, busser, and the chef, were all standing at the front of the restaurant, having a good time talking, when the girl who works the front desk by the name of Tyra starts screaming the word no over and over again. And at first, I thought it was just a bit, like her sports team had lost and she just found out or something like that. But her screaming really was real. She ran across the lobby screaming and almost collapsed, but the chef caught her. She was on a call on her cell phone, and the chef put it on speaker to try and figure out what was wrong. And it turns out that her dad had unexpectedly passed away. She just kept crying and saying no, not today. The chef tried to talk to her while I got her some water and found a blanket and housekeeping to give her because she was shaking so badly. There was a guest in the lobby waiting for a ride, and she came up and thanked me as well as the rest of us for being so kind and being a family towards her. After that occurred, I could not get in the zone for the rest of my shift. I excused myself to go smoke and cry for a few minutes once Tyra got a ride to pick her up. My mom has stage 4 breast cancer, and I know I will probably get the same call at some point. Last Christmas, I was working as a dog walker and a dog sitter, and a previously healthy, rambunctious, and adorable kitten also passed away unexpectedly. My boss at the time was a complete jerk about it and treated it just like an inconvenience, so I ended up spending Christmas and the weeks following consoling the owner who had gotten COVID and couldn't come home. It was an absolute nightmare dealing with this, and it feels like Christmas is just cursed because of it. The saddest part to me is that earlier, Tyra had asked if I had an iPhone charger because her phone was almost out of battery. I didn't at the time, but I did help her find one in the first place. And you know what? She wouldn't have even gotten that call if we didn't find a charger. I don't know the circumstances or anything like that, but maybe that would have been better. Maybe it would have been better for her to find out at home or something like that. One of my coworkers mentioned that it would have been wise if the person calling her just said that there was an emergency and then give her the news in person. And honestly, I really do agree. I just feel so bad, and I'm not a hugger at all, but I want to give her a big hug so badly and at least do something nice for her, but I don't know what to do. Honestly though, I just hate Christmas, and I just can't wait for this holiday to be done. What a tragic situation. I cannot imagine having my loved one pass away on Christmas, or even having this kind of bad luck with this original poster where it seems like something bad always happens on Christmas. That's not fair for you in the slightest, but hopefully in the future you're able to at least take some time off work and instead have some time to yourself, even if you don't celebrate the holiday at all, because what you've done within the past really is unfair. And I think if anything, just make it a vacation in the future. That way you can at least begin to enjoy it. My wife of 7 years and my sister are no longer on speaking terms, and at this point I don't know what to do to try and mend this relationship. I have a very intense sister with very poor boundaries. My sister and wife had a major fallout about 3 years ago. Back then, my wife and I had a disagreement, and my sister jumped to defend me. My wife politely asked her to stay out of it, but my sister refused and started yelling at my wife. My wife then went into the bedroom and closed the door behind herself to avoid a major fight, but my sister followed her to yell at her in our bedroom, where my infant son was sleeping. My wife lost it at this point and yelled back at her to not wake up my son and to get out, stating that she was crazy. So ever since then, my wife and my sister won't talk any longer, both insisting the other is at fault. My wife says she doesn't want a toxic person like my sister in her life any longer. She said she had devoted hours daily to my sister's garbage for years, who called my wife several times a day to complain about her life and my parents. Now she says she won't do it any longer. My wife also uses the incident when my sister almost got us kicked out of our wedding hotel as a reason to be done with her. For some context, back then, my sister's room was 15 minutes late, and she yelled some swear words at the hotel manager who wanted to kick us out for her behavior. My wife handled it back then and managed to convince the manager by begging him not to throw us out. I was not around to help as I was swimming in the pool. My parents were there, but didn't feel like dealing with my sister as she was so intense, so it was all up to my wife to handle her. Now, my wife says that she has had it with my sister and uses plenty of examples why, such as the wedding and also the time my sister threatened to never let me see my niece and nephew again because I allowed my niece to eat pancakes when they were camping. As a fun fact, he is not allergic to it, but my sister doesn't like him to eat gluten because she thinks that it's very unhealthy for him. So for the past 3 years, I have gone on vacation with my family without my wife. I usually fly to where my family is, and my wife stays home. Now, for the second time, my sister invited me and my son, who's only 3 years old, to a beach vacation without my wife. I told my sister I maybe could come, but would need to talk to my wife first. My wife was upset that I even considered it, again just like last year, but says I should do whatever I feel is right in my heart. But many people would think that this is inappropriate. My wife doesn't agree with me that they are both at fault for the current situation, but instead just blames my sister for it. She is open to amends, but insists that my sister at least takes responsibility for just one of her actions and apologizes, which we all know my sister will never do. Just asking her could lead to a major fallout with her. So I always tried my wife to be the bigger person, but she doesn't agree. She says my whole family is enabling my sister by just letting her do whatever she wants, because otherwise she gets so angry and crazy, and we just wouldn't want to deal with that. The sad part is that I agree with some of what my wife is saying. My sister had periods where she would not talk to anybody in the family due to her intense personality. My own mother chose not to talk to my sister for about a year, but I wish my wife would be the bigger person so my kids can play with their cousins, which are my sister's kids. I don't even care that much about my sister, but I really do want my kids to know about their cousins. My wife says that our children will have no negative impact if they didn't get to meet their cousins once a year, who are considerably older and live very far away. She points out that even when she was still putting up with my sister and we were living an hour away from her, we didn't spend much time with her kids more than twice a year, as it always had to suit my sister's schedule, which is very busy with her rich lifestyle of traveling the world first class, along with having private luxury rentals with maids and cooks and all this other stuff. Overall, I'm not sure what to do. I talked to my mom a lot about this, and my mom had tried to get my wife to admit her fault in all of this, and to get my wife to reach out to my sister, but now, my mother and I are just at the point of giving up that these two will ever get along, as it will basically have to come from my wife, who says that she's too busy and tired with 2 small kids and a full-blown job to have a toxic and energy-draining person like my sister in her life. This has caused a lot of stress in my marriage and many fights, but my wife stays firm with her boundaries, no matter how much I tell her to just do this for me if she loves me. My wife does a lot for my parents and other family members. She is the one who plans visits to make sure our kids know their grandparents, so it's not like she is jealous of my family and wants them cut out of my life. It all only goes back to my sister. What should I do? Your wife in this scenario is 100% correct. Even now, with you trying to settle this dispute, it all comes down to you trying to avoid your sister and trying to basically force your wife to say she's sorry for something that she didn't even cause. Literally, your sister's being enabled by your behavior as well as your family's behavior to be this toxic, unstoppable person. So her boundaries are not only not ridiculous, but they are absolutely needed. And the fact that you've gone on vacation with them and you've agreed to any kind of vacation with your sister after the way she talked to your wife is mind-boggling to me. You're not asking your wife to be the bigger person. You are literally asking to turn off her rational brain and expose her children and herself to this abuse. Like, that's not okay. Your sister from the outside looking in sounds like an absolute toxic nightmare, and your wife has clearly put up with enough of her garbage. If anything, you are definitely being the jerk here, and you need to stop enabling your sister and flip the script and be like, you know what? No, this is your fault. And it seems like there's a pattern here of your sister being really toxic and everybody else having to apologize for it. I mean, how is that fair for your wife? Sure, you've got a lifetime of experience with that, but that does not mean that your wife has to be dragged into your weird form of enablement. So honestly, you need to get a grip. And telling your wife that if you love me, you'll just apologize is unbelievably toxic, and you really need to check yourself, because that is honestly just manipulative. And if anything, I think you need to admit to yourself that you are part of this problem, and not your wife, who's just trying to raise her kids and have some semblance of a good marriage. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, use the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out in the description below and subscribe.